And it's a little bit different than most divisions. If you looked at most division maps, they were linear in shape. You could see trains easily move from point A to point B. Not so here in Philadelphia. So let's take a look at one of their maps. As you can see here in red, the trains are going in just about every direction. In fact, if you look in the center, there seems to be trains actually circling around the city of Philadelphia itself. So to clarify what exactly was going on, I highlighted just the main lines. And as you can see from this map, there's actually 3 4-track main lines coming together in Philadelphia at a fantastic place called the Zoo Junction. Through a system of duck unders and flyovers, they weave these 3 main lines together seamlessly. Simply amazing place. And once I discovered Zoo, I knew I had to make that the focal point of my layout. So just how much of this area could I model? As it turns out, this is all I could fit in my basement. Now, when I looked at my basement when it was empty, I thought, wow, I could probably do the whole Northeast corridor. There's so much space here. And I made some doodlings of what it would look like. But when it came time to scale everything out, I realized just how much space a 4-track main line takes up. And this is the design I came up with way back in 2003. I did it old school. It's just graph paper taped together. I got an HO scale template and a box of colored pencils and put my ideas down on the paper. So when we start the tour of my railroad, we'll begin up here, which is the south part of the railroad, at a place called Grace Ferry. And then we'll move up the Schuylkill River. We'll take a look at Arsenal. And then we'll move on to 30th Street Station, and we'll look around here for a little bit. We'll look at Race Street Engine Terminal, or engine facilities, Pencoach Yard, and of course, we'll look at the High Line in the background. Then we'll finally move over to the Zoo, and we'll take a look at my mile into the Zoo interlocking, and hopefully we'll end up with the top of the Schuylkill River on that beautiful stone arch bridge. Okay, yeah, okay, this one's a little different. This is a photograph of Grace Ferry Bridge. It took me a while to find it. Online, the City of Philadelphia Philly History Board, which is a great site, and a lot of photographs of Philadelphia. And I was able to find a picture of this bridge right in the middle of my mind in the modeling period of August 5th, 1955. So from this photograph, I was able to build the bridge. And here's my version of Grace Ferry Bridge as it crosses over the Pennsy. To the left of the bridge is my off-stage area. They're layering tracks for points south of the railroad. Now here, if we jump down onto the main line, we're looking north towards Arsenal. And to the left, you can see the smokestack of the Breyer's ice cream plant. When I was young, my mother used to serve me at Breyer's ice cream, and I loved it. And I remember her telling me, yeah, it's made right in Philadelphia, nearby. So I wanted to find that plant so I could be pulling reefers of Breyer's ice cream out of the siding on my railroad. I thought that'd be great. Well, as more photos of that plant came online, I realized that by the 1950s, it was no longer served by the Pennsy. But I have it on my layout as a backdrop building. Now here's my version of that photograph. And in the background, you can see my feeble tent at the Breyer's ice cream plant. That plant was really huge. I think it went back at least 2 city blocks. It was a massive place, but I just didn't have the space of the railroad to represent it as well as I'd like to. Now, if we move up to Arsenal Tower, and if you were working in Arsenal and you looked out the windows, this is pretty much the scene you would see. This was the Commercial Museum, and it was a series of 3 buildings, maybe 4 they connected to them. But it was built way back in the 1897, I believe. And it was to promote international trade between the city of Philadelphia and the rest of the world. Here, other countries were invited to display their products so that American businessmen could see them and hopefully start a long-lasting business relationship with them. A fascinating place. I learned that you could actually tour that place. There are a lot of school tours. If there's anyone here that went to school in Philadelphia many years ago, you might have had a school tour of this place. They even have posted photos of the displays inside, and I spent many hours just looking over all the different displays that were inside here. The big building to the right is actually Convention Hall. There is another one of the commercial buildings like this from the other side. I thought back in the 60s when they were building the Civic Center on this spot here and all this was torn down, that all the buildings were taken down. But I realized later that the one on the other side, Convention Hall, actually lasted until 1982. I really would have liked to have gone inside and seen what they had on display there. And here's my version of the area. By the 1950s, they decided to spruce up the convention of the commercial museum. They painted the back and the sides with white to match the, I believe it was marble on the front side of the buildings. And it gave it a nice, clean, updated look. So my layout, it's painted white. And here you can see an MP-54 group of cars making their way into the Reed Street Station. Now, this is one of the John Barriger III's photographs. He was a pretty neat guy. He was a railroad executive, I guess you could say. But more importantly, he was a rail fan. And he could take pictures where the normal rail fan could not go. And here's one example right here. He's standing right on the main line tracks, probably stopping everything so he could take a photograph. And in the background, you can see the High Line rising up on the right to cross over the River Line, which was the passenger tracks that led into the lower sections of 30th Street Station. Here's my version of that area. To the left, you can see Convention Hall. It actually had a spur that ran into it, so I had to put that on my layout. I actually found out after I built this area that there was a spur here, so I had to do some cutting up of the platform to fit that one in. And you can see the High Line here as it crosses over the three tracks that are further to the right to enter 30th Street Station, which you can make out in the background here in the upper right corner. Here's a view a little bit further back. And if you have an old issue of the High Line, quite honestly, I forgot to find out what date it was. But there's a cover photo that's pretty much the same photo picture as you see here. The High Line is coming up around the back of the tower. I wasn't able to include the Delaware extension. There would be a Y here on the right side, but I just didn't have the space in my basement for it. So unfortunately, I had to leave that off. There's a power station here to the left. That was used, I believe, for supplying heat to the nursing college and West Philadelphia Hospital, which is to the left of this area. Here's a picture at Convention Hall. Convention Hall was the very first place that I went to go to a train show. And I knew what it looked like. And I could find 1,000 pictures of the front of Convention Hall and the sides of the Convention Hall, but I couldn't find a picture of the back of Convention Hall. It really frustrated me. And it wasn't until a friend of mine, Ron Hoas, did an article on, I believe it was D3 cabin, which sat perched on the side of the High Line up here. And he had a nice aerial shot, and it showed the back side of Convention Hall. So I was finally able to model this side of Convention Hall. And this is that other part of the commercial museum I was talking about earlier. This one lasted until 1982. Moving on a little bit farther, this shows the crossing of the High Line over top of the River Line, the passenger tracks that led to 30th Street Station. It was from the Library of Congress. It was a great photograph. In fact, they have a whole series of the Northeast Corridor. I used those photographs to construct my model of the High Line on my layout. And here's a picture of that crossing on my layout here. You can see a P5A leading a string of reefer cars as a GG1 is bringing in, on my layout, this is the Champion into the lower level of 30th Street Station. Now, there used to be a yard, well, there used to be a yard in this area. But by the 50s, I believe that was gone. But this little switchman shanty was there, so I had to put it there. Now we arrive at 30th Street Station. On the lower track, you see the Keystone waiting to go southbound. And that was a rather unique train. It had its own power car. And that provided all the electricity, heat, and air conditioning for the whole train. It did not rely on the engine to supply all of this. And it was ahead of its time. It was probably 20 years before the railroads caught on to this idea and they started to use power cars in the Amtrak era. Up above, you can see my version of 30th Street Station, and to the left, you can see the High Line going behind the station itself. For those of you who do not know what 30th Street Station looks like, shame on you. It is a beautiful station, built in neoclassical architectural style, and it was built in the middle of the Depression in the 1930s. Amazing accomplishment. The Pennsy was trying to make it a Union station. They had contacted the B&O and the Reading and wanted them to go in on it, and they declined. So it remained an exclusive Pennsylvania Railroad station. It's beautiful, and I'm happy to say that Amtrak does appreciate it. They have restored it at least one time, and I understand it's soon to go over another restoration soon. It's a beautiful station, rather unique. You can see how close to the Schuylkill River they actually built it. And the lower platform tracks are actually about perpendicular to these upper platforms. The upper platforms were used exclusively for the commuter trains. A very unique situation in the train station. Here's my version of 30th Street Station. When I designed this layout way back in 2003, I left 5 feet to build 30th Street Station and the post office that was right next to it. I was rather naive. When it came time to build it, I realized I had just enough room to put 30th Street Station in this spot. And you'll notice the windows are not on this building, especially on the left side. There's some plexiglass. I stole an idea from the New Jersey O-Scale Modelers Club in Cherry Hill. They have a 30th Street Station on their layout, and the whole bottom floor is made out of plexiglass, so you can see the trains as they pass by. And I needed a way to see where I could add or take cars off the trains, cars such as express and baggage cars for operating purposes. And it worked out pretty well for me. Here you can see the view down on the tracks. So my own coupling ramps are all aligned in this area, and it works. It works. You can easily uncouple cars and add cars on the trains as they come into the station. Now here's the lower platforms of 30th Street Station, and you can see how low the windows were on the Keystone. The center of the car was built down low on purpose. It was to lower the center of gravity so that train could theoretically go around curves at a much higher speed than a normal passenger train could. As far as I know, there was only one copy made, and Pennsy bought it. To the left, you can see right here the brass doors, which led to the steps and escalators up into the main concourse of 30th Street Station. Now, this is what I remember in 30th Street Station as a child. As we were making our way into Suburban Station, everything got real bright when we entered 30th Street Station, and I didn't understand why. Later on, I realized that it was a glass roof, and in fact, all the roof above the tracks was open. And that reason was because this was the only place that steam engines were allowed in 30th Street Station. So they had to have a way for the smoke to exit the station without asphyxiating everybody on the platforms. And of course, being a glutton for punishment, I had to model this really neat looking roof support structure they had there. Very elegant looking, and for a 1930s design, it's kind of amazing. So I did it, and here's my version of it. And I was very proud of what I did. In fact, I went to the trouble of embossing rivet strips and bending them around all the curves on this supporting structure. And I thought, boy, that would be neat when the guys see this here. And here you can see a good view of it, the inside of the station. Unfortunately, once I put the roof on, I realized all that rivet strip detail had disappeared. So at least I know it's there. But it was a fun project to do. My station is compressed. 30th Street Station has amazing features when they built it. It actually had a mortuary built inside it. It had a pinball gallery. It had, the roof was actually reinforced enough to have helicopters land on it. That was the general idea they had back when they were building it. It was going to be a multi-transportation method here. Buses, trains, helicopters. Pretty amazing. Now, this is a Temple University photograph. It's actually a Pennsylvania Railroad photograph. I have the pamphlet that this was in. It was put out in the mid-50s, soon after they had finished all the track work at 30th Street Station. And for me, it gave me an idea, or gave me the answer that Ray Street engine pit was painted silver. It wasn't gray. It wasn't that rusty brown that I remember it back in the 80s. So on my lab, I painted it silver. It also gave me some nice detail on these transformers that were out front of the platforms. And here's my version of that area. Again, a P5A is handling the freight train across the High Line. It's just about to pass in front of this power plant that was there until a couple of years ago. A beautiful Art Deco style power plant that was put up in the Depression. Though by now it was no longer needed and it was torn down. It actually provided steam for, I believe, the Pullman building, which is right here, 30th Street Station, and I believe the post office. To the lower right, you can see my version of the Ray Street engine pit. My pin coach yard right here is only about 6 tracks wide, but that's about all I need for the operation on my layout. I didn't see the need to put in the 24, 26 tracks, whatever was actually there. I couldn't fit it there anyway if I wanted to. Behind the islands, a little interesting story. There's a background drawing put on there. I hand painted all that. And there's, I believe, 80 different MP54s in that yard. And I thought, wow, that's going to be really cool. Until I slipped it in the layout and the High Line covers it up most of the way. But it's just another one of those funny things that happen when you're building a layout. Now here you'll notice a passenger train coming over the High Line. And from this photograph, you can tell what day it is. And anyone around Philadelphia knows what day it is. Yeah. It's the day of the Army-Navy game. That's the only time they allow passenger trains to travel across the High Line. So whenever I feel like seeing a passenger train cross the High Line, it instantly becomes the Army-Navy game. Now, as we leave Petticoat Yard, this is the first bridge we come to. This is Spring Garden Street Bridge. And again, I had a hard time figuring out what kind of bridge was here because it's been long gone. And all the photographs I had were aerial ones, and it was just a black blob. I finally was able to locate a close-up photograph of it. In fact, before I did that, I had photographs of the original Spring Garden Street Bridge being built. I have photographs of this pier being constructed by men by hand way back in the 1800s. So I was amazed that when I was researching some of the catenary poles on the High Line, and I used Google Street View for that, I was walking up the Schuylkill Expressway on Google, and behind a billboard, I spotted this stone pier. And I said, what the heck is going on? This is like 2010, and they're still using two of these original stone piers that were built back in the late 1800s to support the bridge that is there to this day. So if you ever go to Schuylkill, look to the left, and you might see these two piers still being used. I just found that amazing. Now here's an aerial view of Zoo Interlochen. This was probably 1971. Both of the yards have been taken out by then, but you can still get an idea of just how massive this place was. They tried to CTC the whole section of Northeast Corridor, and I believe that Zoo is still a holdout. They still haven't added that to the system. Last time I checked, it was still being manned by people, just as it always has when it was built in the 1930s. Truly impressive place. Now here's a shot of Zoo in my layout. Down in the front is Cosgrove Avenue. These are the row houses that were there. And in studying Philadelphia, I realized they had a distinct style of row houses. They were different from Baltimore, different from New York City. And in fact, these row houses were a kit bash from a company in Baltimore. They made Baltimore row houses, and I had them stretch the row house out, and I put their bay window in the front, and they moved the doors for me, and they put a big window in the front to make it Philadelphia style. And then I just scratch built all the trim and the front porches on it to get that look. If anyone knows what this building was, please let me know. I cannot find any information on it. I saw a trailer parked out by it, so I assumed it had something to do with trailers. But I have yet to figure out what the purpose of that building was. In the background, you'll see the row homes along Mantua Avenue. I really didn't feel like painting them by hand. And I discovered I could use Google Street View to take pictures of them and then make a backdrop for them. And it was a little difficult because in the 60s, or now we're talking at least 80 years since they were built or more, a lot of them have changed. They've been improved. So I had to find a right and a left style row house and put it together and then multiply it down to as many row houses I need. They give that look of the 50s. A lot of them had added siding. They enclosed the porches and put modern windows in them. But I was fortunate enough that I could still find one or two in their original condition. And that was fun. Here's the tower itself. This is a model from Shapeways. Steve Smith has a shop called Design Dine, and he has an awful lot of Pensy stuff on it. He's a Pensy modeler. Zoo Tower, it saved me a lot of time. I had to add the gutter system, the drain system to it, and a couple other small things on the roof. And I had shades on the windows. Eventually, I'll put an interior on it and I'll raise those shades up so you can see the inside.
Where did you say that model came from?
Shapeways. Design Dine is the shop. He has a lot of Pensy catenary also available there. Single bridges, a lot of neat stuff to take a look at. Now this area I've heard people call the pit. What you're looking at is the interchange track with the Reading. This was originally 2 tracks, but photographs from the 50s that I have showed as a single track. If the Reading and the B&O had gone in on the Pensy with a Union Station at 30th Street, these double tracks probably would have been the lead tracks in, or the in and out tracks to that station for the Reading. To the right, you'll see a turnout. This is the Pensy's lead in the 30th Street station. The one on the right goes to the lower bottom of platforms at 30th Street, and the one to the left leads up to the commuter platforms. So this is the power station or the substation that was put behind the zoo. Of course, my whole zoo was compressed a lot to make it fit into my layout. But I did manage to put all the major transformers and structures that were in that substation. There were actually 2 banks of these transformers in the back. I only had room for 1. It just looked way too crowded with 2. But everything there had to be scratch built. The transformers are actually made out of wood and some plastic pieces. And the tall girder work here is actually Central Valley girders that I slice and dice to construct them. Now, this is I like things that are different, and this is a different type of single bridge on a Pensy. It's a T-single. There aren't many of them. I just thought it was really neat, and I had them on it. I have pictures of it with the old tombstone position light singles. So I suspect that it was actually built using semaphores originally. But it's still there today. It's still performing the function that it was meant to do for like 100 years. And here you get a closer view of those row homes that I had to pick and choose from in order to get the block and on the layout. Here's another shot of zoo interlocking. Here we're looking west. There's a yard on the right side, and every photograph I had, it seemed to have maintenance away equipment in it. So that's where I park my maintenance away trains. I store them there. To the left, you'll notice this red Texaco truck. Yes, we're not in England. It is on the wrong side of the road. It just so happened the day before my grandson was down at the layout, and he was playing with that truck, and he put it back on the wrong side. So yes, today it is on this side of the road. This is actually Zoological Drive. You can see a couple of mock-ups of the fill up the zoo on the left side here that I've yet to construct, and I'm currently working on those now. This here is a shot. If anyone's familiar with zoo, this track here comes down a very steep grade, and then it makes this curve to the left under the whole complex. Every passenger train coming from New York passes on this track to get to 30th Street Station. And I always thought, boy, that had to be a wild ride inside a train for those, and as they come down there. And when I finally got the right one, I was pleasantly surprised at how gentle it is. You don't even realize how quickly you're descending and the sharp turn you're going around. No one ever notices it. It's just a testimony to the engineering of the Pennsylvania Railroad all those many years ago. And remember, zoo interlocking was built in the early 1900s, and it hasn't changed that much since then. To the right is the entrance for the Belmont branch. That's the Reading interchange tracks. And here's a nice photograph. I had a chuckle when I found this one. It's not a funny situation at all. There was a wreck at Zoo Interlocking, and they came really close to taking out this single bridge. They were really lucky. But I had to laugh at it because every derailment at Zoo, my layout has been right here. And it's always been because I've forgotten from the turnout. But there was a pipe rail fencing fence right along here. And as you can see, the train just took that all out. It's gone. They even took out the cement fence here and freight cars lying on Zoological Drive here. And here's that scene on my layout. And here's that pipe fence. I rebuilt that pipe fence at least 2 times. It's crazy. It's just, life imitates art. I don't know. It's ridiculous. Fortunately, this single bridge has not been taken out under the derailments. It's come close, but it's still standing. You can notice on the right, Zoological Drive, falling down rather steeply to meet Jard Avenue, which crosses under the Pence at this point here. And here's that intersection. Now, I can remember as a child walking across this intersection to enter the Philadelphia Zoo, which is to the right. And when I had children, I walked my sons across this very intersection also on the way to visit the Philadelphia Zoo. So I had to, of course, follow this. And here's my version of that intersection. Back in the 50s, I found that the trolley tracks on Jard Avenue were encased in, still encased in cobblestones, but the outsides of the road were painted. So that's how I built it on my layout. And it turned out decently. The top portion of this bridge at Jard Avenue, actually, I came to the rescue on Shapeways. I actually put some of this. Had something very similar to what was on the bridge, what is still on the bridge at Jard Avenue, and that helped a lot in building the bridge. Now here's a nice, beautiful color shot of that stone arch bridge over the Schuylkill River. Really big bridge. I wish I could have modeled full scale, but of course I had this big process. And here's my version. Now, I did manage getting east to west Village Drive. And I visited this area several times, and it's a really nice place in Philadelphia to visit. Very peaceful. It's a park you can lay on the blanket there and enjoy the day. Really nice. On the bridge itself, you see a GP London, a New Haven train. It's about to pass. Just exiting Zoo Interlock. These catenary pulse, and I really didn't talk much about the catenary pulse. I originally, when I started this out, thought there were really maybe 2 or 3 types of catenary pulse, and I found at least 12 different variations. The Pennsy started building their catenary pulse in 1914. It was an experiment to relieve the congestion at Broad Street Station. And it worked. But those designs were modified over the years. By 1930, they decided to electrify the whole Northeast corridor, and they came up with their H-pole designs, which were a lot simpler, a lot probably cheaper to construct and fix. But these were unique here. I've only found them on this bridge, on the whole system. They are 2 side girders placed on either side of the round poles, and there's actually lattice work on the top and bottom connecting the beams. A unique design. Now here's another John Barriger III's photograph. He was on top of this bridge, and he shot this photograph, and that gave me some closer detail of these catenary poles. Now today they've been modified. They've cut these off, and they have this really funky looking bracing system on the poles today. But back in the 50s, they were still in the original configuration.
Yes. Can you just couple people are having trouble.
Aaron, okay, sorry. This photograph gave me a look at how the top of the bridge was. I could find 100 photographs of the sides, but nothing on the top. This gave me a good idea to lay out. And as you can see here, there was actually 5 tracks wide. The bridge was originally built for 2 tracks. And then they quickly found that that was not sufficient to handle the amount of traffic coming in and go out there. And they expanded the bridge to 5 tracks wide. I also noticed these little alcoves here. If this was a wooden truss, I would say that these were places where rain barrels were put so that they could put out fire that happened on the bridge. I suspect that this is probably just a safe place for workers to go to, because you can see there's very little space here between the track and the side of the bridge. But maybe it was used for rain barrels. I don't know. I doubt it. I think it's possible. Now here's my version on the top of the bridge. You can see those catenary poles that I was able to construct. I do have the alcoves. There's 4 of them in my bridge to an extent. I only have 4 tracks across the bridge. For my modeling purpose, for my operations, 4 tracks, 4 needs.